Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another ACCA performance management video. Now today, I will be introducing you the new topic in the syllabus named as time series and moving averages. Now of course, in my previous video, we have already looked into things to do with correlation and regression analysis. Now that's meant for us to perform the forecasting about the future revenue or the demand. Now today, we'll be making use of this time series model in order to forecast the future sales quantity or the revenue by assessing both the trend and seasonal variation. Now, so all you need to do is always look at the overview. Now we believe that in order to forecast the future sales revenue or the demand, it's always important for us to make use of the trend. Now, of course, trend here refers to long-term movement. And subsequently, we are here to look into another element known as the seasonal variation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, now we understand when you see seasonal variation, and that refers to the short-term variation here. And as a result, now we know in a particular year, say for example, 12 months in a year, there may be in certain months that the sales revenue or the quantity may fluctuate. So therefore, the word variation here could be replaced by fluctuation. All right. Now, so some students may want to know that, Steffi, now is there a different term to replace the word trend? Yes. Now, this is what we call as moving average. Okay. So when you see the calculation of the moving average, and that actually refers to the trend. So we understand that now what we have to do is to make use of the time series model in order for us to perform the forecasting. Now, so of course, there are a couple of steps that you have to see as a summary to make use of the time series. Now, the first thing we have to do is always to identify the moving total. Now, ladies and gentlemen, now this moving total, we believe that it refers to how many months, say for example, or how many quarters moving total. So let me just quote an example that it could be a 3-month moving total. Okay, so when we talk about the word total, that probably the sales figure. All right, so say for example, we believe that what is the sales figure in 3 months, and what I have to do is to get the total figure. Now, moving on. Now, you will then be able to derive at the moving average. Okay, so same thing here. And once you have got this moving total for 3 months, and all you need to do is to divide by 3, and in order for you to derive at the moving average, and that's a trend. Okay, now subsequently, it's possible for you to derive at the seasonal variation. Now, with the use of the seasonal variation, ladies and gentlemen, there are 2 different ways of doing it. Number 1, we can make use of something called the additive model. And this is the first. And of course, number 2, as you can see, is what we call as multiplicative model to derive at this seasonal variation. Okay, so some students may probably wish to know that, Steffi, how do you get this seasonal variation here? Now, so we find that, for example, for the additive model in this case, we're going to calculate as refers to seasonal variation, and all you need to do is to get, say for example, the sales, which is Y. Y refers to the total sales that I'm going to show you later, and that refers to the actual sales as well, and that is Y. And subsequently, you will get to see we're here to minus t. Okay? Now, some students will say, Steffi, why is it y minus t? Because we believe in this. How do you get the sales? It's normally when you take trend plus seasonal variation. So that's called additive. So for now, if you're here to calculate what is the value for S, and that will be y minus t. Okay? Now, so this is quite straightforward when you are seeing this. Now, what about multiplicative? Now, this multiplicative simply means that if let's say you're here to get the total sales, you're going to say T multiplied by S, all right? So again, if that's the case, in order for you to derive at the value of seasonal variation, and all you need to do is to Y divided by T, okay? All right. Now, so that's mainly the third step as a summary. And of course, the fourth step here is when we are here to extrapolate. All right, this is always important, the trend. Now, so what is extrapolate the trend? Of course, later I'm going to tell you to extend the trend. And lastly, start forecasting. So it depends on which method to use. Now, so ladies and gentlemen, again, if let's say we're talking about the steps to use here or method to use here, it could be either the additive or the multiplicative model that we are talking about. Okay, now, so these are the 5 steps that I would suggest you to remember. And the reason why I have to preview these first is because for now, I'm going to show you these articles issued by the examiner team of PM. And from here, I'm going to code the example, all right, for these 5 particular steps in this case. Now, so let's start with the very first paragraph here, as it says. The time series analysis can be used to analyze the historic data because you need the past sales figures and establish any underlying trend and seasonal variation that's within the data. So the trend refers to the general direction of the data that is heading in and can be upward or downward. So the seasonal variations refers to the regular variations, so that's the changes which exist within the data. So we get to know that when you see the word trend, for example, over the years, you can see whether the sales is increasing or it is decreasing generally. And that's what we call as trend. But seasonal variation, probably under certain period of time, things may change. And next. Now this could be a weekly variation with certain days traditionally experiencing higher or lower sales than other days. Or it could be monthly or quarterly variations. Now moving on. Now the trend and seasonal variations can be used to help make predictions. Can you see that? That's what we said. Now which is about the future. And as such can be very useful when budgeting and forecasting. Now class, why is forecasting important to support the budgeting? Because we understand in the process of setting budget, we have to estimate the future sales. And that's what we say as creating the sales budget. And therefore, we know that the forecasted demand will be required to support the setting of the sales budget. Now, so as a result, as what I've mentioned just now, it's possible for you to start looking into this. How do you calculate the moving averages? Now, ladies and gentlemen, to derive at the moving averages, or what we call as the trend, it starts from the moving total. So one method of establishing the underlying trend, which is smoothing out peaks, right, and troughs in a set of data, is the use of moving average technique. So other methods such as like regression analysis, and again, we have already gone through that. So a moving average is a series of averages, which is calculated from the historic data. The moving averages can be calculated for any number of time periods. For example, like what I said, it can be a 3 months moving average, it could be 7-day, or it can be a 4-quarter. So we understand that it could be the odd number or the even number. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if it's 3 months or 7-day, you can see this is more towards the odd number. So for our example now, we're looking at the odd number calculation, and later towards the end, we will be looking at even number period calculation. For example, like 4 quarters, 2 quarters, where it's hardly for you to get the midpoint at the first point of contact. So therefore, this is a simplified examples that later take us through the calculation process. Okay, let us see. Now this is the monthly sales revenue that is for a company for 20X2. Now, so we believe these are all the data from the past, that is 20X2. So should you wish to know about the sales, or I would say the forecast revenue for 20X3, you will then have to forecast or predict. So let's see. We've got the sales from January to December, and you can see like every single month with different figures, but somehow we believe that there could be the trend or the seasonal variations to be identified. So from this data, we calculate a 3 months moving average, let's assume. So in the questions, they will show you. Okay, now, so what should you do in order for you to start calculating the moving total and the moving average? The first thing you have to do is come up with a table. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you can see that that's the month starting from January. And of course, let's assume that sales for the first 3 months. Now, the first thing you have to do is to get the 3 months moving total. Once you've got the moving total, and that's where you move on to the moving average. And of course, this moving average is the trend. And subsequently, this is the seasonal variation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, what is this sales figure here? This sales figure is the actual sales, and that represents Y, all right, in the equation. So, therefore, some students will be asking, where and how should I start? Okay, very simple. Class. Normally, when we are here to calculate the moving total, if it's 3 months, you're going to get number 1, number 2, number 3, add them up. All we need is the total and place it in the midpoint. All right, because this is 1, 2, 3. So the total here, the midpoint is right here. And of course, if April is here, you'll be taking February, March, and April, and the midpoint is going to be here. Okay, so let me just show you right now. Now, in order for you to calculate the 3 months moving average, let's have a look at these. So 1, 2, 3 added up, and that's going to be 4, 5, 6. And that's a moving total. And in order for you to get the moving average, you would just have to divide by 3. And you're going to get 152. You see that? So therefore, this is the trend, which is the T, and this is the sales, which is the Y. So when you have Y, you have T. Later on, we can calculate the seasonal variation. Okay? So some students may be asking, that's Steffi, so are we going to continue the rest of it right here? Yes, of course. For example, now we have January to December. Can you see that? So you're going to make sure that the moving total is right at the midpoint. So it's like 1, 2, 3. Here's your midpoint, 4, 5, 6. And then February, March, and April, the midpoint's right here. Okay? So if let's say the next one, which is for this midpoint, that's going to be March, April, and May. Midpoints here. So April, May, and June, the midpoint is going to be 4, 7, 4. So you have to do it, and you realize that for this moving total, it stops in November. All right. So how do you get the moving average, like I said, using all these moving total and divide it by 3. So you have got all your trend calculated up to November. Okay, so some student may ask, Steffi, assuming I'm going to estimate or predict my sales in January next year, but my trend stops in November. So what can I do? Now, what you can do is to extrapolate, but we have to identify how's the trend likely to be before we can extrapolate it. Understand? That means to extend it. But I believe from here, roughly you can see. Now, the trend is 152, 154, 156, 158, 60, 62, 64, and 170. And do you realize that, based on this example, it's just nice that every subsequent month is with an increase of $2,000 here. So therefore, we believe that later, when you extrapolate it, the December figure will be 172, and if it's January next year, that's 174. So increase by 2,000 per month. Okay, so would that be possible for you to get the seasonal variation? Yes, depends on whether you're making use of additive or multiplicative model here. Okay, so let's see. Now, so it's exactly like what I've just mentioned and calculating the trend. So I believe that the trend that I've just told you, that is going to be 2,000 higher than the preceding month. So therefore, it's possible for you to predict the future underlying sales values, especially when you've got the trend right here. Okay? Now, of course, ladies and gentlemen, what about the seasonal variation? So for the seasonal variation, as it says, once a trend has been established, and any seasonal variation can be calculated. So now we find that how do you calculate the seasonal variation? That is the difference between the actual sales and the trend. Can you see that? So which one is the actual sales? Which is Y, this one, this particular column. So it's either with the use of the additive model or multiplicative model. Now class, if it's the additive model, we understand that it's trend plus seasonal variation to derive at the sales. Multiplicative, that's Y equals to T multiplied by S. So it's exactly like what I've mentioned just now. So remember, if it's on the additive, to calculate seasonal variation, make sure Y minus T. But if let's say the multiplicative, and what you have to do is to make sure that you take Y divided by T in this case. All right, so let's have a look at this. Now we're going to kickstart with the use of the additive model right here. So to calculate the seasonal variation, we have to go back to the table, and from here, I'll be able to brief you. Okay, now first of all, now we understand that moving total were derived earlier, and these are all the moving average. You agree? So therefore, in order for you to use the additive model, the seasonal variation here means you are taking this Y, the sales, and minus off the trend. Okay, so apparently this actual sales is lower than the trend by 7, so it's negative 7. And what does it indicate? Now that indicates that in the future, it is predicted or forecast that in this particular month, the sales will be lower by 7,000. Same goes to this. 186 minus 154, 131 minus 156. So sometimes it may be negative and sometimes it could be positive. Can you see that? So the trend is there. So we understand it's like, let's say in February, drop by 7, and we expect in May it will drop by 7 again. And when it comes to August, when it comes to November, the sales, it's going to be declining. So that's a seasonal fluctuation. But when it comes to March, or probably the month of June, or even in September, that the sales will increase by $32,000. Okay, so I would say that based on this example, the trend is just nice for you to see it's quite consistent. But I believe that in actual, or in some of the exam questions, that it won't be that case, because every single month we expect the seasonal variation could be different. So that's what you can see. A negative variation means the actual figure in that period is less than the trend, as we said. And a positive figure means that the actual is more than the trend. Okay, of course, positive will be good because positive indicate a higher sales or it could be the revenue or the quantity. Okay. Now, so that's quite okay with the explanation that I've just mentioned. So therefore, we believe that what about with the use of multiplicative model? Now, we say that we had actually used the multiplicative model. The variation would have been expressed in terms of percentage rather than absolute. So let us see. Now, we're talking about using sales, which is Y, and to divide by T. So that's why you can see 145, this is Y divided by T, and this is about 95%, 0.95. So what is the 0.95? The 0.95 means that your actual sales is actually 95% of 152. I repeat. So when you take this trend 152, that's what you estimated, and you multiply with the 95%, and that will be the sales in February. But what about 121? Now 1.21 represents that it's more than 100%. So therefore, when you estimated that the trend is 154, your forecast sales could be more than 100%, which is 1.21 here. Okay? Now, so therefore, you can see. Now, this is actually what you should do, looking into how you multiply and get the sales. Okay? Now, the sales right here is either increasing or decreasing over time, and that depends on the percentage that you have estimated. Now, so ladies and gentlemen, I would say that with the use of multiplicative seems to be more reliable as compared to additive model. So in the exam, it depends on which model they're going to test. Now, my advice is to get all of them remembered. Okay, since we know these are the two different sets, it could be additive y minus t or multiplicative y divided by t. So consider quite straightforward. Now let's just take a look at step 5, which is using the time series to forecast the future. So let us see. Now, so how do you forecast? Don't forget, the actual sales figure that we have, it was only up to 20x2 December. And we're now talking about 20x3. So using the above example, what is the predicted level of the sales revenue? That is for June 20x3 and July 20x3. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let me just come back to these and to tell you about these. Now we can see. We say the trend has to be extrapolated. So we have to extend the trend. Try the thing. Now we stop at November. So from November to next year, June, you have to extend another 7 months. Am I right? So it's going to be 2,000 increase, 2,000, 2,000, 2,000, 2,000. So therefore, if you extend another 7 months from November, that will be June 20x3, you have to top up 140,000. All right? Well, I would say, sorry, it would be 14,000 because it's 2,000 per month. So that's going to be 14. Okay, 14. Okay, let's see. So start with the trend, then apply the seasonal variation. Okay, you can see. So increasing trend of 2,000 per month, the last figure in November, that's 170. So we assume that the trend continues to be done previously, then June 20x3 will believe that it will increase by 14,000 as we said. So adding this to the figures we have for November, how do you estimate it? Now, June, additive model, you have the 184, that's the trend, because from the 170 plus 14. And don't forget, we know that the sales exhibit a seasonal variation. So let's see last year June, if it's additive model. Additive model, June, it will increase by 32,000. It's just an estimate. So you know what? We will then take the trend, 184, plus $32,000, and this is $216,000. Now, you know what this is? This is T plus S. It's under the additive model. And again, what about if it's for July? It's the same thing. If it's for July, we know this is not just 170, but you will have to top up with 16 because June was 14. Now July is one additional month, so it's going to be 16, so it's 186. Let's check. What is the seasonal variation for July? Okay, let's have a look. July, the seasonal variation is to minus 25,000. So therefore, you can see here, we're taking these 186 and minus off 25. So the forecast sales in July is going to be 161 for your information. Okay? So ladies and gentlemen, now some students may be asking and say that, hey Steffi, do you think these will give rise to 100% reliance, or I would say reliability in the first place to the business? Of course, it is not. And it's mainly a reference we are talking about that we are seeing. So therefore, this is how we actually perform the forecasting. And that's your final answer. Can you see that? Because you have extrapolated the trend. So when you start forecasting, so it depends on which method you use. So what we have just mentioned, it was actually to use the trend plus seasonal variation. Now, in this article, they did not mention about the multiplicative. So what are we going to do? Now, if it's multiplicative, all right, assuming, what you're going to do, if it's to forecast February, what is the trend? Now, to forecast February next year, so when it comes to December, this is 172, January 174, February 176. Am I correct for the trend? So you will just have to take 176 in February, that's the trend, multiply by 0.95. All right, so based on the February trend, when you multiply by 0.95, then you'll be able to get next year predicted sales. And of course, it's going to be the same for some other periods. Okay. Now, is this quite straightforward? I would say so. So it depends on which method you are using. Now, of course, we're here to look at the very last part for this article. Calculating the moving averages for an even number of periods. Now, we're talking about 3 months, 7 days. So we understand that in the first place, those were just the odd number. But we are now talking about the even number for your information. Okay? Now, ladies and gentlemen, so we say in the above example, we use a 3 months moving average. And looking back at step 2, we can see the average is shown against the midpoint of the 3 observations. Now, but again, if we are here talking about the even number, for example, a 4-quarter moving average, we do the same basic calculation. But the midpoint will be between the observations. So therefore, what we should do is going to be here. Let me just share this to you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you can see we have quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4 for the year. So moving total for 4 quarters is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So the midpoint is right between quarter 2 and 3, and that's 1290. You see that? So it's hardly to match back to quarter 2 or 3 for future forecast. So what you can do is that you continue with another 4-quarter moving total. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's another midpoint. So therefore, what you can do here is you have 2 choices. Number 1, you can go straight directly to calculate the moving average right here, which is 1290 divided by 4. Get the moving average directly, add them up, and divide by, now these 4 again, divide by the 2, I should say. So when I say divide by the 2, because we're taking these and these, we take the average. Okay, you can do so. Or what you can do is, you can take 1290 plus 1310, and you get your midpoint here. And that becomes the 8-quarter moving total. You can do that. All right, taking 1290, 1310 added up. So right here, this is 8 quarter moving total. And to get the moving average, you would just divide by 8 and you will come back to the same figure. All right, so it depends on which one you go for. But I personally prefer to use the second approach, which means taking 4 quarter moving total plus 4 quarter moving total to get the 8 quarter moving total, then to divide by 8. Okay? Now, without this midpoint, without this moving average, it's not possible for you to calculate the seasonal variation or even to forecast. Okay? Now, so if it's even number estimation, we believe there'll be additional steps to be performed right here. Okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, now this is all about the time series model. And I will say it, whatever you're seeing here is something that have been covered in the management accounting paper. So therefore, what happened is for now, we'll have a look at the conclusion. The care must be taken, however, when using the time series analysis. This forecasting method is based on the assumption that what has happened in the past is a good indicator of what is likely to happen in the future. In this example, the suggestion is that the sales revenue will continue to grow by 2,000 per month indefinitely. So if we consider the concept of the product life cycle, we can see that this is rather simplistic and flawed assumption. In the real world, the changes in the environment, such as like technological, social, environmental, political, economic, etc., can create uncertainty and making forecasts made from the past observations unrealistic. Okay? Now, so is this back to the same point like we were talking about correlation, regression analysis? Yes. Okay? So that's why in your exam question, all they need you to do is to remember the 5 steps and to make sure you're able to get your sales forecasted, and so that you're able to derive at the demand or the sales quantity in order for you to perform and to set the sales budget. Okay? Now, so once again, this is an article now which is written by a member of the performance management examining team, which is relevant to your upcoming exam from September 2021 to the future examinations. Alright, so once again, thank you for watching the video and I hope you find it useful. Thank you.